I'm Keira. The morning my father died, I stood in the hospital room holding his cold hand. My sisters, Isabelle and Sasha, were already on their phones, dividing his empire. Isabelle was talking to the family lawyer about company shares. Sasha, standing by the window, was discussing the sale of his Manhattan penthouse. I was just there. At the will reading, they got everything. The $31 million company, Hawthorne Logistics, the cars, the house. I got a single black phone, locked behind a password. On its screen, a faint blue countdown, 243 days remaining. Sasha actually laughed. She put her hand on my shoulder and smirked. Guess Dad wanted you to learn responsibility. A week later, I was locked out of the penthouse. I was sleeping in my car, clutching that useless phone, wondering how the two people who shared my blood could feel like strangers. That phone was a locked box, counting down to nothing. How long would you hold on to a promise that made no sense? On my 18th birthday, at exactly 6 a.m., it started ringing. I still remember the smell of that hospital room. Sharp, sterile antiseptic, trying and failing to cover the faint scent of my father's cologne. He was gone, but the air still felt heavy with his presence. I stood there, frozen, while my sisters moved like business executives closing a deal. Isabelle, the oldest, didn't even look at him. She was already pacing by the window, her designer blazer perfectly straight. "We'll need the board's approval before Monday," she said, her voice crisp, her eyes on the Manhattan skyline. Dad would have wanted a smooth transition. Sasha was flipping through her phone, no doubt checking the market. A smooth transition. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab her by the shoulders and shake her. He's not even cold yet. But my voice caught in my throat. The words just turned to ash on my tongue. It felt like I was suffocating. I just stood there, invisible, while the two most important people in his life acted like he was just another item on a meeting agenda. 3 days later, we were at the will reading. The lawyer's office was all dark wood and leather, smelling of old paper and money. The lawyer himself, a man who had known me since I was born, wouldn't meet my eyes. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke. "To my daughters, Isabelle and Sasha, I leave Hawthorne Logistics, valued at $31 million, along with all associated assets, properties, and vehicles." 31 million. Isabelle nodded once, satisfied. Sasha was already texting. Then, the lawyer looked at me. His gaze was full of pity, which somehow felt worse than the anger. "To my youngest, Keira, I leave personal item number 7, Alpha." The room fell silent. A black phone was placed on the polished mahogany table in front of me. Ordinary, unremarkable, except for that glowing blue timer on the screen. 243 days remaining. Sasha laughed first. A short, sharp bark of a laugh. "That's it? A phone?" Isabelle, ever the pragmatist, just smirked. Her voice was laced with that familiar condescending tone she saved just for me. "Maybe it's symbolic, Keira. Like, grow up and get a job." I didn't respond. I didn't say a word. I just stared at that phone, the reflection of the countdown flickering in my eyes. I realized, in that cold, quiet room, that grief wasn't the worst part. It was knowing that the people who shared my blood no longer shared my heart. I picked up the phone. It was heavy, cold, and I walked out. 2 weeks after the funeral, I was no longer Keira Hawthorne, daughter of a millionaire. I was just Keira. I was sleeping in the back seat of my beat-up Toyota, parked behind an old, 24-hour diner on the Hudson. The neon sign buzzed and flickered, casting red light over the cracked dashboard. The black phone was my only companion, its blue timer pulsing softly in the dark. 229 days remaining. My sisters, the same ones who posted family first on Instagram every holiday, had locked me out. I learned this the hard way. I had driven back to the penthouse, just wanting to get my dad's letters, my mom's necklace, anything that felt real. Sasha was the one who met me. She stood by the elevator, arms folded, blocking the entrance. She looked bored. "You can take your clothes," she said, her voice flat. A security guard stood behind her, holding a single duffel bag. "My duffel bag." "Sasha, please," I whispered. "Dad's letters, Mom's necklace." She smiled. A thin, tight smile, like she'd just won the final point in a game I didn't even know we were playing. "Those?" she said. "They're in the apartment, which means they're company property now." I drove away with that one duffel bag and the black phone sitting on the passenger seat, glowing faintly. I couldn't let it go. The phone, the countdown. It was the only thing that felt like him. The only mystery he had left just for me. I found a cyber cafe in Queens, the kind of place that smells like stale coffee and burnt dust. I paid a hacker, a guy named Drew, with tired eyes and fast fingers, $200, almost the last of my cash. "Just get it open," I said. "I don't care how." He worked for 2 hours. He plugged it into towers, ran diagnostics, and typed lines of code so fast his hands blurred. I just watched, my stomach twisting. Finally, he unplugged it and pushed the phone back toward me across the sticky desk. "This isn't normal encryption," he said, rubbing his temples. "This is military grade, maybe even custom coded. Whoever locked this didn't want it opened early. Not by me. Not by anyone." That night, as rain tapped on the car roof, I stared at the ticking timer, 217 days remaining. I bought a cheap spiral journal from the diner. I started keeping notes. Day 10. Tried mom's birthday. Failed. Day Sitten. Tried Hawthorne Anatradive. Failed. Day 20. Tried giving up. Couldn't. Sometimes I hated that phone. I wanted to throw it into the Hudson, but I couldn't. It was the last piece of him I had. Sometimes, in the dark, I'd whisper to it, like it could hear me. "Dad, what are you trying to tell me?" No answer, just the faint blue glow, counting down. Before everything fell apart, my father used to say, "You can't lead from a glass office if you don't know how the floor feels under your feet." He was the kind of man who wore $1,000 suits but spent his afternoons walking the shipping docks, his polished shoes covered in grime. He'd greet every worker by name, ask about their kids, share a coffee from a stained thermos. My sisters never understood that. To them, the warehouses were just assets, the people just payroll. When I was 15, he brought me to the main warehouse for the first time. The air was thick with the smell of oil, steel, and damp cardboard. The sound of forklifts was a constant, thundering echo. Isabelle and Sasha had refused to come. Sasha said it was dirty, and Isabelle said it was inefficient. But I loved it. Dad handed me a safety vest. "Your sisters understand profit," he said, his voice serious as he watched a crane lift a container. "And that's important. But it's not everything." He looked at me, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "You, Keira. You'll understand people." He was right. That summer, I worked alongside the crew. I learned how to pack a crate properly, how to read a manifest, how to balance a shipment. The workers called me Little K, and they'd sneak me cold sodas when the breaks ran late. One afternoon, Dad sat with me on the edge of the loading dock, our legs dangling, the sun setting behind the rows of trucks. "You know why I bring you here?" he asked. "To embarrass me in front of the cute forklift driver?" I teased. He laughed softly. "No, Keira, because this is the heart of what I built. The world will always respect power, but it will follow purpose." He tapped my arm. "And you've got purpose in your bones." He fell quiet after that, just staring at the horizon. It was one of the last good memories I have. In his last weeks, he started acting strange. He locked himself in his study for hours, making hushed, urgent phone calls. I saw bank statements on his desk for accounts I didn't recognize, wires to places I'd never heard of. Once, I heard him murmuring my name through the thick wooden door, his voice strained. Then, the night before his heart attack, he called me into his study. The room was dark, except for his desk lamp. His eyes looked tired, exhausted, but there was something fierce behind them. A fire I hadn't seen in months. "This is yours," he said. He slid that same black phone across his desk. It was new then, sleek and heavy. "Dad, what is this?" "Something that will test you," he replied, his voice low. "And something that will protect you." He covered my hand with his. His skin was warm. "When the time comes, it will unlock itself." Promise me. Promise me you'll hold on to it, Keira. No matter what. I promise, Dad, I said, my voice small, even though I didn't understand. Now, sitting alone in my car, that memory was all I had. I looked at the phone, its blue light reflecting on the rain-streaked window, 204 days remaining. I was holding on, but I had no idea what I was holding on for. The night before my 18th birthday, the city felt colder than usual. I'd parked my car near an empty gas station, the massive, unlit sign looming over me like a shadow. I was wrapped in a blanket that still smelled faintly of the penthouse, a scent I knew I'd never get back. I stared at the black phone on my dashboard. The countdown, once 243 days, now read, 1 day remaining. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every hour, I checked the screen, my heart thumping a strange, anxious rhythm. Was this all a joke? A cruel, final prank from a man I thought I knew? Or was it something else? At 5:59 a.m., the first gray light of dawn began to bleed across the windshield. My breath fogged the glass. And then it happened. The phone began to vibrate. Not a gentle buzz, but a sharp, insistent vibration that rattled against the dashboard. It was so strong, it sounded like a warning. The blue glow, usually so faint, flared. It flooded the small car, bathing everything in an intense electric light. The countdown vanished. The screen went black for a second, and then a single contact appeared. Just 2 words. RH Legacy. My heart stopped. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely touch the screen. RH. Richard Hawthorne. My father. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the call button. What if this was real? What if it wasn't? With a deep, shuddering breath, I pressed call. It rang twice. And then, his voice filled the car. Happy birthday, Keira. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. It wasn't a memory. It was here. It was him. Calm, deliberate, recorded, but so alive it felt like he was sitting in the passenger seat. Dad? I whispered, tears instantly blurring my vision. My throat felt like it was closing in on itself. You finally reached the age, his voice continued, steady and strong. I knew you would. You didn't give up, Keira. Even when they took everything, even when it made no sense, you held on. You kept your promise. A sob escaped my lips, hot and sharp. That's why you're ready now. Ready? I choked out the word to the empty car. Ready for what? There was a pause, a recorded silence just long enough to make my stomach twist into a knot. For the truth, he said. And for your inheritance. My fingers gripped the steering wheel as the phone screen in my hand suddenly shifted. The call interface vanished, replaced by a map with a single, flashing set of coordinates. A text message appeared below it, stark white on the black screen. Building 14-7, Hawthorne Industrial Park. Sub-ch. Code, 7 Alpha Crown 11961. Then, a new timer appeared at the bottom. A red timer. 72 hours remaining before auto-transfer. Dad, I whispered, my voice trembling. What's down there? The voice replied one last time, quieter, as if it were a secret meant only for me. It's what your sisters were never meant to find. The call ended. The screen went black. For a long moment, I sat frozen in the gray light, listening to the sound of my heartbeat echoing in the silence. Then I turned the key in the ignition. The coordinates led me 40 miles north of Manhattan, to a stretch of abandoned industrial warehouses I hadn't thought about in years. Hawthorne Industrial Park. My sisters had been trying to sell this land, complaining that the holding taxes were a drain. According to them, nothing valuable was left here. As I pulled my beat-up Toyota up to Building 47, the early morning fog clung to the cracked asphalt like a secret. The building was dark, its windows shattered. It looked derelict. But a lone security booth stood by the rusted gate. A light was on inside. A man in his 50s, his face kind, sat inside, a cup of steaming coffee beside him. He looked up as I approached, and a faint, sad smile touched his lips. "Morning, Miss Hawthorne," he said, his voice gravelly. "Your father said you'd come today." I froze, my hand on the car door. You knew my father?" He nodded. "Name's Marcus. He told me to keep watch. Said I'd know the right person when they arrived. Been 3 years. He stepped out and handed me a security card, its edges worn white with time. "This opens everything you need. Use the elevator through the main loading dock." "And Miss Keira?" I looked at him. Good luck. The inside of the warehouse was exactly what I expected. Dust, silence, the smell of rust and old tires. Rusted forklifts sat like skeletons. But behind a steel wall marked maintenance only, there was a small, clean fingerprint scanner. I pressed the worn security card to it. A hiss of hydraulics echoed through the vast, empty space and the wall. The entire wall slid open. An elevator waited. Small, metallic, humming with unseen power. I stepped inside. The doors slid shut, sealing me in. My hands shook as I scanned the code from the phone. 7 Alpha Crown, 11961. The elevator didn't move for a second. Then, it didn't go up. It dropped. It was a smooth, silent descent that felt endless. 30 seconds, 60 seconds. My ears popped from the pressure change. The floor indicator, a simple digital display, flashed. Sub 3. The doors opened. And I gasped. It wasn't a room. It was a vast underground chamber, glowing with soft, white light. The air was cool and clean. The space stretched wider than a gymnasium. One entire wall was covered in massive, digital maps, supply routes crisscrossing continents, highlighted in blue and red. Another wall hummed with dozens of servers, their lights blinking in rhythmic patterns. In the absolute center of the room, there was a single, polished mahogany desk, my father's desk, from his study. I walked toward it, my footsteps echoing on the polished concrete floor. On it lay 3 items: a leather-bound journal, a silver laptop, and a framed photograph of my father holding me as a baby. My hands were trembling so hard I could barely open the journal. His handwriting, so familiar, sprawled across the first page. "Keira, if you're reading this, you found what the world was never meant to see. Hawthorne Logistics, the company your sisters inherited, is real, legitimate, and profitable. But it's only the surface." I turned the page. My throat tightened. For 22 years, we've used those same trucks and ships to move something far more valuable than money: hope. I flipped through the pages. Lists of shipments, coded manifests, medical supplies, restricted zone, education kits, Syria, relief route 9. My father had been running a global humanitarian network, disguised as a shipping empire. I turned to the laptop. It lit up the moment I touched it. No password required. On the screen, a cluster of offshore accounts. Switzerland, Singapore, Cyprus. The total balance flashed at the bottom of the screen. I read it once, twice. My knees went weak, and I gripped the desk. Sui Launchen Wen Meiyuan. A small, yellow sticky note clung to the corner of the screen, written in my father's unmistakable hand. "This isn't wealth, Keira. It's responsibility." I sank into the chair, my legs giving out. Tears blurred the glowing numbers. $420 million. My sisters had stolen a company, but I had inherited a mission, a responsibility that was so heavy it felt like I couldn't breathe. "Dad," I whispered into the silent humming room. "You didn't leave me behind. You were preparing me all along." And then, as if in answer, the black phone in my pocket started to vibrate again. It wasn't the same faint hum as before. This was sharp, deliberate, demanding. I looked at the screen. The RH Legacy contact was gone. A new ID flashed in its place. Foundation command. My hand was still shaking as I answered. "Hello? Miss Hawthorne." The voice was crisp, British, and radiated a calm, commanding authority. "My name is Mika. I am the Director of Operations for the Hawthorne Foundation." My mind was reeling. The foundation? I don't understand. My father's dead." "Yes," the voice, Mika, said gently, "but his work isn't. Your father instructed me to contact you on this day, at precisely this time, if you successfully unlocked the bunker." "What is this place?" I asked, looking around at the blinking maps. Mika paused, and when she spoke again, I could hear the quiet pride in her voice. "Your father built one of the largest underground humanitarian networks in the world. Officially, it doesn't exist. Unofficially, it has saved 2.3 million lives across 27 countries. Every inefficient shipping route, every unexplained expense your sisters complained about, those were our cover operations. While they chased profit, he chased purpose. I pressed a hand to my mouth, a sob catching in my throat. He never told me. He couldn't, Mika said. He had to be sure. He tested all of you, your sisters. They failed the moment they chose greed over grace. Her words hit me like a physical blow. You, she continued, her voice softening, you passed. You passed because you held on when logic told you to let go. You held on to a promise, even when you were sleeping in your car. That, Miss Hawthorne, was the test. A low chime came from the silver laptop. I looked at the screen. A document was downloading. The heading read, Hawthorne Logistics Ownership Transfer Protocols. Line by line, legal documents populated the screen, each one bearing digital seals and signatures. My name appeared beside my father's. Hazel Hawthorne, majority shareholder, 55%. I stared at it, trembling. 10% trust allocation plus 45% via subsidiary Shell Holdings. This can't be real. It's very real, Mika replied. The moment you turned 18 and unlocked that phone, all dormant assets activated. You are now the legal head of Hawthorne Logistics, and by extension, the foundation. Tears were stinging my eyes, but they weren't tears of grief. They were something else. He trusted me, I whispered. He trusted me with all of this. Your father didn't just build a company, Keira, Mika said softly. He built a network. He knew the world didn't need another ruthless CEO. It needs you. The line was quiet. I looked down, and my eyes fell on the desk drawer. I pulled it open. Inside lay another phone, identical to mine, but unlocked. Its contact list was full. I recognized names from headlines. Senators, global ministers, CEOs of companies that could move mountains with a single call. I closed my eyes, the weight of his faith pressing on my chest like a physical object. For the first time since his death, I wasn't just speaking to the air. I was making a vow. Dad, I whispered, gripping the edge of his desk. I won't fail you. By sunrise the next day, I knew what I had to do. For months, I'd been invisible. The poor sister, the family embarrassment, the girl sleeping in her car. Not anymore. I drove straight to the Hawthorne Logistics headquarters. A towering glass building my father once called a monument to arrogance. I wasn't wearing my old, worn-out clothes. I was wearing my father's charcoal suit jacket, the one I'd saved in my duffel bag. It still smelled faintly of cedar and cologne. My heart was pounding, but for the first time, it wasn't from fear. It was from purpose. I kept my head high as I stepped into the lobby. Heads turned. They saw a ghost. I didn't wait for an invitation. I walked straight to the executive floor and into the main boardroom. They were all there. Isabelle and Sasha, surrounded by executives and lawyers, all staring at charts glowing on a massive screen. They didn't look up when I entered. Sasha just sighed, annoyed. Keira, this is a private meeting. Security, can you handle this? Sit down, Sasha. My voice didn't shake. It cut through the silence of the room, sharp and clear. I placed a thick folder, printed from the bunker's laptop, on the polished table. I'm not leaving. Isabelle leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. That old, condescending smirk. Keira, you have no authority here. You're trespassing. Actually, I said, meeting her cold gaze. I do. I opened the folder. Inside were the notarized documents, the transfer certificates, the Shell holding breakdowns. As of 6 a.m. yesterday, I own 55% of Hawthorne Logistics. You'll find all the verification here, corporate, legal, and digital. I suggest you read it before you speak again. The room went still. You could have heard a pin drop. One of the executives, the CFO, adjusted his glasses. That's impossible. The ownership trusts were sealed. They were sealed from you, I interrupted. Not from me. Sasha snatched the folder, her hands visibly shaking as she flipped through the pages, her face drained of all color. This can't be right. This is fraud. It's very right, I said quietly. Dad made sure of it. Go ahead, call the lawyers. Every document is ironclad. Silence. Even the air felt heavy. Then I did something none of them expected. "I'm not firing you," I said, looking at my sisters. Their faces were a mask of shock and fury. "You're both brilliant at what you do, just misguided." I took a deep breath. "But things are changing. Effective immediately, 20% of our net profit will be diverted to fund humanitarian logistics under the Hawthorne Foundation. And those 17 warehouse employees you wanted to cut last quarter? They're being promoted to management roles." Sasha's voice cracked. "You can't be serious. They don't even have degrees." "They have something better," I said, stepping closer to the table, feeling the power of my father's jacket on my shoulders. "They have loyalty. They have experience. They've been running this company's real operations for years. You just never noticed." Isabelle stood, shaking with rage. "You'll destroy everything he built." "No," I said softly, the truth of it settling in my bones. "I'll finish what he started." I turned to leave, but paused at the doorway, looking back at them. "You both got what you wanted. The spotlight, the status, the money. I got what I needed. The truth." 3 years passed. The Hawthorne name, once synonymous with luxury and greed, transformed. News outlets wrote about our company's radical reform. They called it reckless at first, until the world began to see the results. We opened 12 new humanitarian corridors across conflict zones, shipping medical supplies disguised as freight. We built water filtration stations in villages no government dared to visit. Over 300,000 children received education kits labeled as industrial materials. And the most remarkable thing? My sisters changed too. Sasha came to me first. She showed up at my office one night, nervous, holding an envelope. "I want to fund the Ukraine mission," she said quietly. "No cameras, no press, just do it." For the first time, I saw sincerity in her eyes. Isabelle followed months later. She never apologized, she's not the type. But one day, I found her in the legal department, poring over foundation contracts. She now manages all our legal operations, protecting our roots from political interference. We weren't sisters who loved each other, not yet, but we were partners. We finally respected each other. My found family grew. Mika, my father's director of operations, became my closest ally, the voice of reason when I doubted myself. And Marcus? He still guards, Building 47, like a watchful ghost. I bring him coffee during my late-night visits, and he just smiles, knowing. The black phone still sits on my desk. Its countdown is long gone. But sometimes, usually around 6 a.m., it vibrates softly, lighting up with a single message, coordinates received. Each time, I follow. A refugee camp, a destroyed hospital, a school waiting for supplies. Last week, a shipment reached a hospital in Gaza. The photo they sent back showed a little girl, no older than 6, holding one of our packages. She was smiling, her hands covered in dust. On the side of the box, in black marker, someone had written, "Hawthorne Foundation. Hope delivered." I stared at that photo, and I whispered, "We did it, Dad." I still keep his journal in my desk drawer, its pages worn from my fingers tracing his handwriting. There's one line I never understood until now. Sometimes, you must lose everything to learn what can't be taken away. I lost my home, my wealth, and the family I thought I knew, but I found my purpose. The sisters who once mocked me now stand beside me. The company that once measured success in dollars now measures it in lives saved. It took a locked phone to unlock who I was meant to be, and it took losing everything to inherit something far greater than money, a legacy. If you believe in finding your purpose, even when you feel locked out and alone, subscribe for more stories. You're not invisible,